Le Corbusier, definitely a big name. I've always considered myself kind of an armchair architect. Always wanted to be an architect and not formally, but that's such a big name. And I think in concrete design and build and that brutalist form was definitely something early on. I think that, I mean, caught my eye and careful not to like really imitate, but you're going to emulate and find things from somewhere. And yeah, Le Corbusier is I mean, absolutely someone that, I'm sure I've leaned into.
You coming from a background of carpenting, carpenters?
Yeah.
Although your early career was more into numbers, banking,
Yeah.
and then you decided to break away and become an artisan, an artist, a designer. So how did that happen? What triggered that?
I did a bunch of carpentry, growing up when I was younger. I had a handful of uncles they were all carpenters. Even when I went to college in Madison, Wisconsin, and did a bunch of carpentry when I was there. It was one of those things I've always enjoyed working with my hands. The idea of, creating and building something real out of real material. And I think once, I don't know what it was, I majored in economics, always wondering what that next step was as far as like a job, a career, what should I be doing? Fell into sort of a career path with a bank and had a number of jobs. And I think I always just missed working with my hands in that way though. Like I was at the bank for over 10 years. My wife and I actually bought a home that needed a bunch of attention. It's like a 1961 Rambler, that kind of, love that era. And it needed a ton of attention. So when we moved in, started slowly remodeling and doing different things in and around the house. And I think that really kind of respurred that, that want and that need to start building things again. And that's sort of where it came from as far as the furniture aspect came from. I actually destroyed our basement making furniture then, which needed to be remodeled anyways. That was always a part of the plan, but I was like pouring concrete and I made a sink, and then I made like a dozen different tables and literally kind of destroyed our basement mixing concrete in our walkout basement. And that was kind of the start of it as far as, and that I think specifically the intrigue with that material.
Let's talk about the medium, concrete. What's it like to work with concrete?
It can be a really finicky material, which I don't know if I'm like a glutton for punishment. I think that when it comes to woodworking and certainly like steel work and, and welding and stuff like that, there are a lot less variables, I think, in working with those materials. But concrete is interesting where it can take on so many different shapes and forms as well, which is half the fun. But you mentioned dangers like even silica dust and mixing it. It's heavy nature, which, working on designs and things to make it lighter, which is fun, not only in appearance, but, literally lighter as well, which is nice. So anytime you can kind of incorporate it with wood and steel and kind of have it still be sort of a main or one of the main mediums, but have the piece be lighter, that certainly can be nice as far as transport or delivering, I think. But it's fun because for me it's so gratifying when you can tear open the forms and see that end product. For whatever reason, it can be different every time too. And I've said it before that like it has this innate imperfection, which I love. So the idea of like chasing that sort of perfection, but knowing you'll never get there. But it's that sort of that assurance of getting something almost new every time as well. You can really control it, but that's kind of half the fun too, is sort of embracing that imperfection to a degree.
Then you brought in wood. What's it like to work with wood, concrete, and metal?
Yeah, I think woodworking, and there's so much you can do to control that, which is nice. And I've always loved the juxtaposition of those two materials, wood being, it kind of ebbs and flows with change in temperature and moisture, and concrete, not so much, although it'll hold, that little bit of moisture over its lifetime. It never goes away. But the idea of those two materials that maybe, shouldn't be formed right along together, right, with one another, but trying to make them work in harmony is always, kind of fun as well.
So what you're doing is rationalistic, functional type of art. Takes a long time to do this, and it's quite heavy. How do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I do a lot of it myself. I've had a few, friends and people certainly help in the past, and good friendship is invaluable to that degree. If anytime I can get a helping hand, a forklift is very helpful. Finding new ways of which my back thanks me for it. Learning certain lessons the hard way, and how to lift certain things, and being smarter about it. Certainly, as you get older, just trying to be more careful in how you move and transport things, and again, trying to make them lighter. But I think that there's always as the old saying goes, if there's a will, there's a way. There's always I had an interesting job a couple of weeks ago where it seems kind of impossible on paper, and then where literally all these objects, I think I made about 20 different things, and most of them needed to be forklifted onto a truck and drove it to Colorado, and then I needed to take them off with a forklift and place them, which a lot of that I just enjoy, the idea of problem solving, not only in design and designing for a specific space and need, but kind of problem solving, like get some of the logistics, how to get it from point A to B. It's just interesting to me. It keeps the job interesting too, for sure.
You said somewhere that pig comes actually from pigment, but then it became this metaphor of the pig. And as I'm looking at your studio, you kind of use that pigment, the same kind of color. Have you been able to trademark your company, your work, your style?
Yeah, I think, and early on, I did. That was probably some of the most interesting and fun things when you're just getting started. The excitement behind that, and like, well, what do I have to do to take this seriously? Could it be a real thing? I don't know. What would a brand sort of image look like? What resonates? What sort of a reflection of myself? And I'm sort of introverted, though. I enjoy hiding behind that brand and that work. Like, I don't usually like sticking my neck out or my head out to a degree. It's all about I like the work to kind of do its thing and stand out, because in the end, it's not about me. And I think that, sort of having a simple image around that can resonate and sort of hopefully kind of stand the test of time, like the concrete, like the material in and of itself was sort of the idea. But that idea of just a very simple image that is almost the opposite of what you think of interior design and furniture and, really refined brands that are out there. The pig is just something kind of different. It sort of trots outside of some of those lines. I think that's what kind of intrigued me about it initially.
I noticed that you have done work for different places, coffee shops, lounges, and also you have functional public art.
Yeah, I think the latter is something that I've always wanted to get into more and more. I think the idea of large, interesting objects in public spaces, things that everyone can use and interact with, has sort of been the goal all along. I think that, and you mentioned Le Corbusier early on, like the idea of, I've always had the infatuation with, of course, really functional things. A chair that's obviously comfortable. It fits those. Something that is ergonomically, very well thought of and comfortable for the average person, and a table that works and things that. But the idea of objects that are not that they're unapproachable, but might look unapproachable and then are very comfortable, and that I love the idea of just further interaction with. Between someone and said object, that finding those different ways to kind of connect emotionally. I know that, and it might even sound strange, thinking of furniture as far as an emotional connection, but I think if you can why not? Why can't you design and create objects with the intent of that sort of meaningful connection? That's sort of the intent behind everything, I think.
I see instruments behind you. Are you also a musician?
Yeah, well, so I'm actually so I had a shed that was falling apart. That was kind of my pandemic project, but I tore that down and wanted to make a music studio in my backyard. So that's where I am currently. But yeah, that afforded me finding those those downtime, anytime I sort of see a downtick in work, and finding that those openings to maybe write more and play music and do stuff like that, which is really gratifying and super fun. So
you live in a city that is well known for cultural life, and that also means competition. So how do you manage to coexist with your peers?
yeah, I would admit, and early on, even very lucky, like being here, not only here in this city, but in this time, as far as like this sort of design and creative kind of almost renaissance. Like there are I know tons of people who make furniture. Like we're so lucky to be able to create and do things like this for a living. I think that, and early on, once I felt that, oh, this could be a real possibility, like competition was more at top of mind, to the degree where I probably felt more threatened by it. And then as time has gone along, like the world's such a big space, but like everyone can play and exist and work alongside in cooperation. I think music is even like sort of, for me at least personally, it's like made the world much bigger yet smaller at the same time. I don't know, if things can be very ego driven, I guess, but they don't have to be. The more I treat things as like you're simply playing and creating because it is what you want to do and it's fun and it fuels you, it's sometimes can be that simple and things will fall into place. If you're constantly just working at things, and I think that you'll eventually find your path and be able to work with those people that want to work with you. And it's just short answer is just lucky as well.
Do you have any regrets, leaving the business sector?
My biggest regret is not pursuing this earlier, much earlier. Like, I wish I had the guts. I always looked up to people who could do it, like, and do things and just be willing to jump and run. And I think I definitely had some trepidation as far as and who doesn't, like that fear of the unknown, like what could happen, I'll fall on my face. And that has certainly happened. And it's not so bad once you're on the other side and you see it. It's like, I would definitely say that's my biggest regret, not trying to do more things earlier.
When you start the project, do you do sketches? Do you do research? What do you do?
It depends on the project, really. And I think that the partner or client need anyone who, depending on, because it can vary very widely as far as their need. They might have a very specific need, and they see something on my website or something I posted, and they're like, I love this coffee table. I want this, but I want it in XYZ dimensions, or maybe I want a sink vanity, or maybe it's a client that, and when I'm lucky enough to get it every now and again, someone who trusts me and is like, here's my space. What do you think? Can you help design it? We want you to design and think about it. And that was the case with this job just a few weeks ago, again, where it was a clinic. It's, a 900 square foot clinic, and they wanted me to really think about the space and sort of, holistically and it's really fun when you can put yourself in a client's shoes, but even their customers' shoes. And when they're walking through the space, how will they interact with things? What should they be experiencing? What should they see first? What's most important? And those are the most fun too. Again, back to problem solving, like thinking about everything, customer, client, and like how will they interact with these objects, and what are the real needs at the end of the day. Those are the most fun jobs.
Do you get to interact with other artisans or other artists and consult with them, exchange ideas?
Absolutely. Like I said before, I'm so lucky where when I quit my job at the bank, and it was almost like starting my life over to a degree. Like I wasn't really familiar with the industry, and we have a flourishing arts district here, and just trying to sort of get into that world and be more involved in that world, which I hadn't been prior as much. So like meeting people and meeting people who specifically design and create furniture and objects, sort of like I do too. So I think, and there have been a number of projects where I have a buddy who has a CNC machine, and he makes cool stuff, but he also works for a company making, very specific coffee tables. And we were just collaborating on, the idea of a concrete sort of base for this, the specific table. That'll happen often, which is super fun to be able to at times kind of climb out of your comfort zone as well and think about something a little different.
You are working with specific tools, machinery, which is different from, a carpenter. And from what I've seen, they're pretty big. What kind of tools would you use?
Well, I think my go-to, and as far as mixes, I think mix design, I used to mix a lot from scratch, but I've been fortunate to partner with a local company that, a larger concrete company, and they'll mix things for me. The structural engineer that I know there, who's a good friend, and we kind of talked about a couple mix designs. So now I have them mix them in 50-pound bags, which is really nice. So all the stuff is already in the mix, like, plasticizers and certain, as far as the silica and different sands and Portland cements and fly ash and stuff that are included in that mix. So I can just kind of add water and play with it more minimally from there. I can be thinking about design and less about, will this mix turn out, which is nice. It's much more controlled. So it starts with those different mixes, which is great. And then I have a big paddle mixer, which is kind of my go-to in the shop. And about a quarter of the space is sort of walled off, or it's kind of my like wet space. I could make a mess in that corner, which is where the mixer is. So all the mixing, all the pouring will happen there. And then I can kind of take it out and wet sand it and clean it and start to refine it and then seal it from there. So as far as the concrete work, that sort of quarter of the shop is partitioned just for that work. And then what's nice is I have, my dry area with, all the woodworking and then another corner for, the steel saw, and my welder is there. So I can kind of have things organized and happening and working through the space as needed.
I saw an installation with LEDs.
Oh yeah, like LED lighting in there were maybe speaker boxes or concrete seating. Yeah, that was fun.
Was that for a specific show, or it was a commission for someone?
It was commissioned. It was through in partnership with another local firm, a design firm called Juxtaposition. And it was for a new residential building. So it was just like a seating arrangement right outside kind of the front of their space. That's fun. I just drove by it for the first time in a while, but just drove by it this last week to take a look at it. And it looks cool, especially at night. They can kind of manipulate the lighting as they'd like to.
What are you working on right now?
Well, just sort of finishing a job with it's for like a large reception desk. I just poured it on site. It was very large, so the only way to do it really was to create the forms in my shop. I put it all together, making sure it would work, and then disassembled it and reassembled it on site so I could pour it there. It was almost 4,000 pounds, so it kind of made sense to it's a really long wall, essentially, just kind of a foundational piece for their reception, and had to pour it there. So I'll go back next week and start to take those forms off and then finish it and seal it. Like I said, just did an install for a job out in Colorado, which was really fun, outfitting a space. We have something called Art-A-Whirl. That's kind of a big deal here locally, which is super fun, but going to have a few furniture pieces that I'll be bringing them over this afternoon, actually, to a friend she's an interior designer, has a cool space kind of in the heart of the arts district. So it'll be fun to have some stuff on display for that, which is in a couple of weeks here. It seemed like the last 3 months were kind of crazy. I try to do my best to kind of time things, and then that never happens. Like a job will get delayed and then everything happens all at the same time, which is what it's felt like these last 2 months or so. And then it'll kind of get a little quiet again until I'm, hopefully it kind of ramps up, which hopefully take advantage and play and make a little more music in that downtime as well.
What kind of music do you play?
Well, we're kind of just getting started. I've been writing again, I'd say pretty consistently the last couple of years, which has been fun, but I've been very lucky to have some talented musicians to be playing with as well. And we recorded 8 tracks actually in January, and now we're slowly releasing them. It's kind of like a, Americana, rock and roll, kind of a, psychedelic Americana thing. Very straightforward, kind of, it's really fun. Maybe some, with some folk roots. Yeah, hopefully we played a few times, but hoping that this summer we can really, as we kind of roll some new songs out, we're able to play them out and about as well, which would be fun.
It would be nice to do a large guitar made of concrete.
Yeah, I've thought about it. That would be cool. I feel like someone's probably done it before. I know, like steel guitars exist. I think that would be very heavy, but to do it would be very possible to like make an electric, kind of like this Les Paul. But I think even if it was just the body of the guitar, doing it in concrete, which would be kind of wild. And then, but you'd probably still want a wood neck and other components to fill in the blanks, but probably a very sturdy strap to hold up that 35-pound guitar or whatever it would weigh.
Do you play the guitar and the vocals?
Yeah, I do a lot of writing, and then I'll play mainly rhythm guitar and sing. And we have another guy who plays lead guitar, somebody on piano and keys, and then drums and bass guitar.
Do you ever get strange comments or strange questions regarding your logo?
Not so much, but maybe I will now, or I'll be more in tune to it now that you've asked it. I think that I do have a tattoo of a pig on my forearm. I think that sometimes when people see it, they'll be like, "Oh, cool tattoo." They'll assume like I might be into like barbecuing or something, or something like that, which is kind of funny. Like, "Oh, do you have a barbecue joint, or do you like?" And for years, I actually didn't eat pork. Like it was a part of my thing for a very long time. Like I just, I had an affinity for this animal. I was really living it. I've slowly come back around the last couple of years. I do have bacon every now and again. Like bacon is delicious, I think. I mean, to each their own. I think that in so many ways that animal kind of, here's this dirty animal and it slops around in its mud but to a degree, I think it's a smart animal. It can be sort of refined. I think it and it's not afraid to maybe play. I think, and that's what I kind of, and sort of, maybe by happenstance, but sometimes when I'm mixing with concrete and I literally have my hands in the mud, I'm like, I get to play in mud. It's like who can say that they're that lucky that they get to, play in mud and create and make things. That's really interesting, though. It's an interesting question. Fortunately, it hasn't I don't know. It hasn't elicited any super strange questions from people yet, but now maybe it might. I don't know.
How do you see the future of interior design? It's changing all the time. How do you think it will change?
That's a great question. I mean, I don't know if anybody has a crystal ball. I think that in my mind, and I don't know if it's with age and with, some of the materials I work with, they can be green, but also like concrete isn't the greenest material. I think I get very, and again, with each passing year, I think I get pickier and pickier as far as the jobs I want to take. I want them to be special, not because I think I'm special. Like I'm trying to be really conscious of I want to make things that the person that's getting it is in love with it and they're going to live with it. And I want it to last hundreds of years. That's kind of the idea. It's like, I don't want to just make a bunch of things and have them hit the landfill. Minimalism and minimal design, minimal lines usually means and the more minimal, sometimes the greater the effort, which is great and fine. I think the whole idea of less is more, not only in design and in less objects, but also just being conscious of what you're living with and what's around you. Personally, I think, and a lot of interior design, how it's driven with and what isn't, as far as money and influence. The people that can really afford these really expensive things, they'll create. And I personally struggle with that and will forever. I'm sure people that, and like myself and people that make furniture, they probably struggle with pricing and the value of these objects that they create. And essentially the value of yourself. You're kind of valuing yourself. You're valuing your time. How do you do that? It's a challenge, I think. But the idea of where will interior design go? That's a really interesting question. Who knows? And that's the exciting part. Somebody's going to wake up tomorrow or next year, and they're going to create this cool new wild object that people will glob onto and will lead to new ideas. And that's kind of the beauty of design in and of itself. Much like music, it's like a lot of things have already been thought of before or maybe built before, and it's balancing those two things. I had somebody say recently, like they don't believe in really looking, and I kind of believe it, but like actively looking, and like which leads to copying or like maybe heavy emulation, and some of that is sort of unavoidable, though. I mean, we have to be inspired by one another. Like, I don't see how you avoid that, but to a degree, you kind of want to. I don't think you can live in a vacuum, but you want to try to live in a vacuum, because sometimes that leads to the most interesting design. But I feel like, do you know what I mean? Sometimes and that leads to like the most personal, empathetic, driven sort of design and art, if you can try to live in that vacuum, at least for a moment.
What would you say was the most challenging piece you have done?
There are a few different challenges. Selfishly, I'm thinking music right now, just because there's so many similarities with it. I think anytime you have to like sort of break through certain things and be as vulnerable where you're not maybe used to being that vulnerable, those are the most challenging things to create. It happens a lot with songwriting. It happens a lot with furniture, like making objects sometimes, and I haven't done it in a couple of years, and I want to carve out. I used to be better at carving out time here and there, just making that thing that was kind of in my brain, even though I thought it was weird. And I had, a few years ago, I made like a centipede chair. I have this fear of house centipedes. They move very fast. They have very long legs, but creating a lounge chair that looks like a centipede. So that was, sometimes it's creating those things. It's like where you worry what others will think, and others will go, that is too weird. That is very weird. But the chair was interesting, and when you get into it, it's very comfortable, even though it might make you feel uncomfortable when you look at it. I think, and back to those artifacts or objects, where if you can get people to sort of, and maybe it's not all good, and that's fine. I mean, that's sort of the point of art. It's like, it's not for everyone, but I think if there's true empathy in art, you'll at least find that one person that sees it and can maybe relate to it, or goes, wow, that's weird. I've never thought of that. Or, that kind of strikes a chord. Sometimes that can be the most challenging, to get yourself to make those things and bring them out in the world, even though you're afraid to.
These pieces are so large and heavy. It's kind of hard to go to a salon, to show them in a salon or in a show, or to have a traveling show.
Yeah, I think people who travel to shows and events, that's like a whole other beast. That's a thing that I respect those people. A lot of woodworkers, it takes a lot of time to be loading your trailer, drive to a new city on this weekend, set up shop, talk to hundreds of people, hope you can sell something, you get your name out there, load your trailer up, do the same thing. It's tough. I've only done things really kind of locally in the Midwest, in the United States. I haven't really, partially because they're just, things get to be really heavy. So it hasn't seemed worth it. And, being flexible to, because early on I thought, I'm going to design, try to design some of these pieces, have specific furniture lines, and hopefully people see them and they'll just pluck directly from these lines. And that really hasn't been the case. Sometimes that does happen. Most of the time, though, they'll see things and want it a little larger, smaller, different dimension. But to be honest, it's like most of the work has been completely custom. It's usually like, and that's kind of now the point too. It's at least if you can excite someone and spark their imagination because they saw a couple things that you made prior, and then they go, well, is this possible? And you're like, absolutely. Like, I mean, that is, and what I've learned, it took me a while to get there, but that's some of the most fun stuff, is like thinking from the ground up and creating something from scratch. But yeah, it makes it very difficult to kind of be on the move with some of these things to do events like that, certainly.
What motivates you?
I don't know, my nervousness, my anxiety to a degree, but I mean, that's somewhat true. I think, I mean, sometimes I can just generally be anxious, but also like seeing the other side and having some of that legitimately fuel you, because it's, well, I don't want to go back and do a corporate job. I have to make this work. That kind of fuels me as well, I think. But really, just the work simply fuels me. I think if you can find things, or at least for the most part, at least this is my approach, is I might build things. I don't talk about them all. The things that I'm really passionate about, I'll talk about, because then, of course, hopefully people will see those things, and that leads to more things that I really want to make. It's that simple. Like, you just don't need to be talking about, some retaining wall or a concrete countertop or something like that. You know what I mean? At least not in my case, because for one, it's too heavy, and that's just tough work to be doing that all the time. But I think if you can just simply enjoy the process, and like I had a neighbor that they were talking about changing up their landscaping, and I just drew him a quick sketch last night and sent it over to him, and then kind of mapped out like a bar that another friend wanted to make himself in his basement. It's like, I really enjoy doing that. Like, again, that's like some of that problem solving. It's like thinking about their space and measuring them out, and helping think and design about those specifics. That's the kind of stuff that fuels me, for sure.